right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another spectacular episode of Reactionary Opinions. I'm here as usual. D-Dog's here. What's going on there, D-Dog?
Oh man, I'm just trying to come out of this food coma after all this Chinaman chow I've indulged in.
Brilliant. Can't go wrong with Chinese food now, can you?
Yeah.
Russell, what's going on there, brother?
No, just business as usual. Business as usual on my side. The week's going well. Interested to get down into some discussions here. Yeah.
Talking about a discussion, we have a juicy one for you this evening. How this is going to work is Russell is going to be laying out a case for Western Patriarchy and why Western Patriarchy is the only true patriarchy in the world today. He has made a case for this before with us offline, so chatting and that sort of thing, and he makes a pretty good case. So what we're going to do is Russell is just going to make a case for why Western Patriarchy is the only true patriarchy, and myself and Dylan are going to question him, ask him a couple of questions, and we'll try and keep this one within a tight 20 minutes. Go ahead, Russell, blow our minds.
Okay, gents. Well, I think as always, when we start with when we look at a word, the best place to start always is with a definition, and the word patriarchy comes from the Greek word patriarchos, and literally it actually means ruler, but actually more specifically it means ruling father. All right. So it actually has it's basically a male ruler, which is has the title of a father. So it's very much
Russell, can I just stop you there quickly for 1 second? So patriarchy from the Greek word ruling father. So just that word I can already dissect into Latin as well, sort of spawning from Greek as well. So patriarchy, which means, so patre meaning father, arche meaning arch or highest or leader.
Correct. But it specifically comes from the Greek, word, from the Greek language, and it's obviously when my mind started to work on the word patriarchy, but it's what was originally written in Greek. So I looked at the Greek New Testament, all right, and I found a number of verses in the Bible, and one of the things we've got to get clear, if you look at the definition of patriarchy as it is defined originally in the original Greek, it actually doesn't necessarily, it's got nothing to do with men ruling over women as it has been framed in the West today. That is a false definition. Okay, it's essentially got to do with the father figure ruling over family and others. So father figure ruling over daughters, sons, wife, and other sort of household issues. So now if you've got servants in your house, if you're a very wealthy person, etc. So it's your whole household. The patriarch is the rule of the household as a whole. So it's not just the leadership function is not just men oppressing women, as as it's framed in Western culture today. When the word patriarchy is mentioned, that's how it's framed. It's actually an incorrect definition. Just like they changed the definition of the word bigot to mean something else. Bigot is actually traditionally means not allowing somebody to hold a different view to yours, or to not allow somebody to express a particular view. That's bigot. But today that definition is not used. So the language is very important. They've kind of redefined the word. Patriarchos is essentially ruling father. It's got nothing to do with how it's framed in modern Western society as merely men ruling over women. It's not the same thing, all right? And also, when I looked at the uses in the Bible verses, that it was a bit of interesting. I had to look up the Greek word in Greek and then try to find it where it was used in the Bible. It was quite actually a bit of a challenge. because I don't speak Greek. I don't read Greek either, So
That'd be my department.
I was about to give Dylan a call and say, Dylan, what book of the Bible is this? I can't tell which one it says, but I figured out exactly which book it was. So, but it's interesting how I'll quote a couple of Bible verses here. It's used very much in a leadership direction sort of role.
Funny, while you're looking that up, just rooted to the Greek, all throughout the Orthodox Church to this day, the head of sort of a church body is actually called the patriarch.
The patriarch.
So we have a patriarch of Constantinople, a patriarch of Moscow.
Correct. It's ruling. It's called. That's why exactly what the Greek word is, ruling father.
Yeah, and that's what they are. They're the ruling spiritual father of the church in their different jurisdictions. So.
Yeah, just a couple of verses here. It's in Acts 7. I'm just going to read one of them. Acts 7, verse 2, 4, 8, and 9. I'll just read one of them, which is verse 4, where Stephen is speaking to the Sanhedrin here, talking about Abraham. It says here, so he left the land of the Chaldeans and settled in Haran. After the death of his father, God sent him to his land where you and I are living. So it's clearly sometimes the Bible uses the word patriarch as the direct translation, and sometimes it uses the word father in the Bible as well. So, but it's essentially what I'm getting at briefly is that I want to make a very, very strong connection between ruling father, being the father being the being the male word for male leadership, but it is male, but it is not male over female. It's male as a father leader over a community or a family. Okay.
So how does this scale up now, Russell? How does this scale up from the family model to society?
Well, look, like I said, essentially, what are fathers? So now now that we've established what we've established, I want to move to the next thing. Essentially, what these rulers are, ruling father. Ruling also means a father would also be a leader. Okay. So when you are looking into Judeo-Christian Western society, the whole premise is that the father is also a leader. Okay. Now, when you merge, we've already established that patriarchy in the original Greek sense is ruling father. Now we want to add to that the idea that it is leadership, and the premise that the premise that Christians have is that Christ himself is the ultimate leader. All right. And what did Christ do? Christ lays down his life for those he rules over. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So the general premise that I am making is that the idea of Western patriarchy is deeply, deeply, deeply rooted in the idea of that ruling father, patriarchy is one of servant and of laying one's life down for whoever they are responsible for. Be that the husband for the wife, the father for the children, the church father for the church community, etc., etc. It's leadership throughout the ranks. So the idea that is the essential premise of Western society is it has to be based on the patriarchal system.
So I mean, Russell, this is clearly noted in early monarchies and stuff where you had the king that went to war. Was sort of right at the battlefield in front, went to war with his soldiers, could have died. I mean, many kings actually in history died on the battlefields themselves. Could have died on the battlefield fighting with his own people and all of that, laying his life down for his people. And that's essentially what the patriarchy is. It's not, yes, sure, you are the leader of them, but you're also willing to die for your subjects.
Correct. That is the basis of of patriarchy. Patriarchy is a good thing. It's become a swear word in the Western, in this in this culture war, in this battle of ideas. But when somebody mentions patriarchy to me, I see something to be celebrated.
Yeah. Well, it is exactly that, because making the ultimate sacrifice is literally the highest honor that you can do for anyone. Making the ultimate sacrifice, or being willing to die for someone, you are that person's absolute servant.
Yeah,
so I don't.
correct.
This is the whole logic behind it. So when someone says things like, the patriarchy is all about oppression and all of that, I'll say, well, I mean, is giving your life for someone, giving your life for your subject, is that being oppressive? Is fighting on the battlefields with and alongside your subjects, is that being oppressive? I think not.
And I think what happened, obviously, Christian Western society, as it went through the ages, that notion of leaders laying down lives for subjects has it's rooted, always been rooted in patriarchy, and it grew and it developed, and it stayed in place for probably a good 1,000 years within the culture, that it became so deep rooted. Hey Dylan, I mean, the thing is, I'm just speculating here, but it was probably so deeply rooted over 1,000 years into the psyche of the culture at the time, that it actually became something.
Yeah, it became a cultural standpoint. It's funny, as you guys were saying this and talking about the ruling father and sort of the influence of Christendom. So when just Islam, it's all about sort of submission to God, basically. So God is the ruler, and we are supposed to submit to him. And Christianity, of course, has that too. But there's that other aspect, love the Lord God with all your heart and soul, and then love your neighbor as thyself, which is kind of the and in fulfilling these two things, we fulfill all the commandments, right? And I was just thinking about this letter that a French monarch wrote to his son. It was Louis the Ninth of France, and he was a medieval king. And it's just funny, sort of the letter and how he writes it. He's like, yes, you're a boss, but I'm just going to read a couple of passages from this. So it says, dear son, have a tender, pitiful heart for the poor and for those whom you believe to be in misery of heart or body, and according to your ability, comfort them and aid them with some alms. Maintain good customs in your realm and put down the bad ones. Do not oppress your people and do not burden them with tolls or tallies, except under very great necessity. And there's more things in here about, so if there's a conflict between your lords and the peasants, initially always side with your peasants. You're there to serve your common folk, most sort of default to that, and then sort of suss out the situation. So it's very it's sort of this classic Christian patriarchal ethos, which is preserved over the centuries and is kind of a good testament to what you're saying. So yes, you are the lord of the realm. You're the top dog, but you are underneath God, and you have religious responsibilities to the church. And it also says here, where was this other thing? I advise you that you listen willingly and devoutly to services of the Holy Church. And when you're in the church, avoid frivolity and trifling. And do not look here and there, but pray to God with lips and heart alike, while entertaining sweet thoughts about him, especially at the Mass, when the body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ is consecrated, and for a little time before. So the whole thing is this kind of a holistic view of masculinity and patriarchy. So it's by serving God, it enlightens us how we should serve others as well. So we're clearly the leader, but the Lord served humanity out of his grace, and so too it falls to the patriarch to do the same for his nation, for his family, for his community, so on.
Absolutely.
And this is why God ordained monarchy is the best.
The West
Yeah,
is
well,
the
look,
best.
it doesn't have, right now, I'll settle for anybody with, no matter how they come to power, anyone that would have the view of laying down their lives for those people that they serve. That's the essential thing, no matter how it happens.
Well, I mean, yes, the thing is also is if you have a leader that is willing to do that, you'll have that leader will have his subjects eternal service. They'll always eternally be his subjects. Yeah, they'll have his gratitude forever. Anyway, Russell, I want to touch on quickly. Now let's get into something slightly more controversial. Let's talk about the differences between, particularly because we are on the continent of Africa. Let's talk about the difference between Western patriarchy and African patriarchy.
Well, look, like I say, when we talk African patriarchy, we can only talk about it in a traditional sense, historic traditional sense. It's not as the qualification. What I'm saying is how it is before, with in a absent of Christianization, should I say? It's not a African society is not at this stage of its area is not as clean cut, but I'm talking it in a very, very historic traditional sense, last few hundred years, you know what I mean? Maybe not the last 20, 40 years, but historically through the ages, as what we've recorded anyway. But generally speaking, you'll find that society, although is definitely male dominated, we won't dispute that whatsoever. But it doesn't have it wouldn't, the idea of a ruling father in the way it's described in Western society isn't there in African society. I don't believe so anyway, because you can see it in the way the way traditionally it's worked itself out. If you, for instance, basically the women and children of a African community basically serve the men of the community. So you'll find the young boys herding the cattle in the fields. They'll look after the cattle and the livestock, and they'll work pretty hard. You know what I mean? And then you'll find the women working also in the fields and in the households and that sort of thing, and the men being young men over a certain age, and older, not even titled men, they'll generally be served by the women and children on a day-to-day basis. That's historically
is the main thing, is that the woman's purpose within that sort of culture. And I guess you're right, Russell, saying things like African culture, because the reality of it is that
there is no African culture.
Yeah.
Well, it's difficult. It's difficult to. I mean, African culture is difficult to nail down as it is. Even the old ancient African culture is difficult to actually conceptualize, because because of its tribal nature. It's difficult to nail down, and it's even more so difficult to do it in the modern era as well. So I'm speaking in very, very broad terms here.
Yeah, well, look, for me, my derivatives of African culture and what I derive from African culture is things that I've experienced, growing up as a kid in the Eastern Cape in a small town and observing how it works and stuff. I mean, I remember as a kid we used to go and play marbles in the townships and stuff, and there was a clear, or not only a clear, but a vast difference between my culture growing up and a lot of my black friends' culture growing up. And one of the things that was abundantly clear was the fact that the woman was there to serve the man, and not only in the sense of that the woman must cook and clean and all this sort of thing, but the woman is subject to the man at all costs. There was no. I know this is also a bit of a vague term and a difficult term to use, but there's almost no chivalry in the culture that I experienced as a kid growing up. Chivalry doesn't exist in what I experienced. But that was just my experiences. I mean, I can't say that this is exactly how it is. But one culture, Russell, that we can say is exactly how it is the Arab and Islamic culture, right? Because that's very well developed.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the thing is, it's very much like that as well. I've always said, this is the great paradox. Is maybe not so much in African culture. I'm not, like I say, I'm not 100% sure on that one. But in Arab culture or Islamic culture, I can tell you now that if it wasn't for Islamic women, there would be women practicing Islam. There would be no Islam, because
it's true.
because. The women are, from what I've observed, just like here living in Cape Town as well, the Muslim women basically are, although very much in the far in the background, they are the ones that actually
hold everything together.
Hold everything together. They are, and because they are, because of that nurturing nature, they hold that the children and everything together. So there's no real, like I said, I mean, you look at the Syrian refugees going into Europe or from the Middle East and all these. I mean, you didn't see very many family units. It wasn't mother, father, son, daughter. You know what I mean? It was just men. All right. Look at all the boats coming from Libya into Italy over the Mediterranean. It's all military age men. All right.
But in a traditional Western patriarchal society, it would be women and children because the men would be left behind to fight.
Yeah. Well, look, this is it. You see, I mean, the thing is, it would be a case of, okay, well, look, I mean, I'll hold out here for as long as I can. Get the women and children out. Once they're safe, then we can come. You know what I mean? Something like that.
The only exceptions to that I could think of are like, and this is fairly common, I think, kind of across cultures, is economic migrancy. So like the husband will move somewhere, make a bunch of money, and sort of send it back home. You see that sort of thing in the U.S. a lot, and I know some European immigrants early on they kind of had that too, where they'd send remittances back home, as they call it. But apparently these are supposedly refugees, right? But we all know that they're mostly economic migrants.
Sorry, Dylan. That there's not a lot wrong with economic migrants. Like I think that's a if you want to draw a comparison, it could be kind of like the early slaves and stuff within the Roman Empire that joined the Roman legion and kind of fought their way through while their family were back in Rome or Greece or whatever it was, Carthage or whatever it is, and they would go and fight for their freedom or whatever it is, and earn a pittance, earn some sort of income and that sort of thing, and eventually buy their freedom or whatever it is, or fight their way through freedom. I think that's a similar sort of situation where the family stays at home, the father goes out, earns the money or whatever it is, and all done as a service to the family.
Yes.
Well, look, I mean, the thing is, a lot of these migrants into Europe, we're being told they're from war zones, so it's essentially, which a lot of the time they are. But if they are refugees, I mean, why aren't we seeing? They're being told. We've been told they're refugees. Why can't we? If they're refugees, like I say, people say they're economic migrants. All right, that's fine. But then they should be like guest workers. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Precisely.
Which they're not. This is the thing. So I'm going to actually go out and out saying that they are refugees, and they've just decided to come as
sponges,
yeah, or just whatever, to try and get whatever they can. They could be, generally, like I say, I don't buy it as
because their patriarchy sucks.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, because there are actually documented. One of the things, I mean, quickly, I'm going to go through. We spoke about it the other day, I think. Well, earlier before I came on the show, actually, about the Birkenhead drill. And now the Birkenhead drill is that's where the whole idea, the sinking ship, the captain goes down with the ship and women and children first. So they are juxtapose that with many other ferry disasters and all that sort of thing in places like Indonesia and in other areas of the world where all the survivors are actually men who charge the lifeboats, etc. Etc. I think there's even a story in the Birkenhead drill where the captain, there were issues with the boats, with the rescue boats, with the lifeboats, and he basically stood on the stern or whatever and said, none of you stay right here. You're not allowed to go after that boat. All right, you're not allowed to capsize the boat. Similar things happened on the Titanic, where they didn't have enough boats, and the captain did that as well. And he basically said no one else gets on those boats. And they also threatened to shoot anybody that got onto those boats that wasn't a woman or a child.
Yeah, so this is the whole, but this is the irony of the whole patriarchal argument, Russell. We need to end this in just a couple of minutes. But what I think is something that is quite ironic is that the feminist attack at patriarchy is generally targeted toward Western patriarchy, but is never targeted towards Arabic or Muslim patriarchy.
I can tell you why that immediately, because that Western patriarchy is what built Western society into what it is today.
And that's what they're trying to destroy.
That's what they're trying to destroy, because that's the strength of it. They're going for the strength.
Cultural Marxism.
Yeah, and the thing too is, I think it's sort of interesting. You have a top level, and then it sort of comes down. So what we're talking about first was with the king, and his sort of, he's at the top, and he has this Christian responsibility to his people. And below that, you had the nobility, and a good example of this is called is that term noblesse oblige. So basically, which basically means with privileges come responsibilities, not just perks and whatnot. Yeah. So, and sort of and down the lower below that, sort of below the lords and aristocracy to the knights and people like that, you have this concept of chivalry, right? Which is basically like noblesse oblige on the small basis. So you treat women and children with respect. You got to be romantic. You got to take care of, sort of your people and all that within your own small sphere. And it's sort of from the top down. So
correct.
The king serves the nation. In theory, the aristocracy serves the peasantry and his knights, and then the knight sort of served the lady, and that sort of trickles on down to the man, and then the man does the same for his family. And so it's this clearly hierarchical structure, but with always sort of a what you call it, a golden thread, an ideal of benevolence and service, which permeates throughout society.
There's a golden thread running. Yeah, there's a golden thread running through all of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, guys. I think we need to cut it off there. We've been going already for 30 minutes. We try to keep it down to 20 minutes, but so what? Anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Russell, do you want to add any closing statements or anything quick?
No, I've pretty much said. I'll just say that, like the last thing I said was that's why they're going after Western patriarchy, because that's where the Western strength is. So they're attacking it, quite simply put.
Yeah, so it's quite clear that they're attacking the patriarchy because that's basically what built the culture and stuff. So, yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much for listening, guys. Remember to like, subscribe, click the subscribe button. Yeah. Click the dungus. And we'll see you guys around. Stay reactionary out there because
God wills it.
Wills it.